Who wrote this down? Who is Second Isaiah? He says Second Isaiah is not a guy. Second Isaiah is a school of people. He in fact says it's essentially an oral tradition.
If there's right order, the land will be blessed, we'll have fertility, we'll have rain, as David's discussed, and the families of the earth that submit to Yahweh will be fertile and blessed. But if he breaks those covenants, if the order is broken, chaos results. This is the theme of the Book of Mormon.
There's multiple things here. One, is he saying, hey, you have not understood the law of Moses because the true law of Moses really only has meaning in connection with the coming of Christ, which was shown to you through the rituals of kingship? Yes, he is saying that. Is he also seeing himself as the last prince of the house of Nephi and understanding and talking about his own death?
Ladies and gentlemen, coming to you live from the lush rainforests of Pandora, the world of Avatar. We are super excited for this week's video. It's actually one we've been holding on to for some time now. And just as the Savior said to the Nephites in 3rd Nephi, great are the words of Isaiah. And in this episode, Mike and Dave go a little bit further to give more clarity to kind of the composition of Isaiah. And for me personally, any clarification I can get to understand Isaiah better, the better. Better.
100%. So this year for Christmas, we want to give you guys a gift for every single purchase of In the Language of Adam or Key to the Keystone. We want to give you a 25% discount code to Witness Apparel so that you can stand as a witness of Jesus Christ during this holiday that celebrates his birth. And so when you buy a book at planetpreciouspublishing.com, then you will get access to a discount code when you get your confirmation email. You can use that discount code, get 25% off your whole order site-wide. So we hope that you guys use that, and we just appreciate you so much. And let's get into the video.
Welcome to Out of the Best Books with Mike and Dave.
Or Dave and Mike, either way.
Or Dave and I feel like Mike and Dave is more euphonic. It rolls off the Mike and Dave. Probably the quality of the vowels. We promised you we would have attractive young people. And so we want to introduce. We have a new attractive young person. You may be familiar with him from elsewhere in the internet. Do you want to take a moment and introduce our new colleague, Brad?
My wife and I went to the movies, and we saw this movie about missionaries that have to escape from Germany when Hitler kind of takes over and does his thing. And I went to the film, but I'm really bad at remembering titles. And so I asked Brad, I said, first of all, Brad was in the film, and you did an excellent job. And I asked you, I said, Brad, what is the name of that film that you're in where you guys get out of Germany, like you escape from Germany and you get out? And then you told me the name of the film was
Escape from Germany.
Right. And so the running joke is that's kind of how my brain works. I can't remember very obvious things. But it's a really good movie if you haven't seen it. Who was the guy that directed it?
T.C. Christensen.
T.C. Christensen.
Yeah.
And what other stuff has he done?
Like 17 Miracles.
He's done them all, I feel like.
He's like, you think of a Mormon movie that you were like, that was really good.
Yeah.
It was probably him. And this is performing the best out of everything he's done. So it's been really, really cool.
I really liked 17 Miracles. In fact, I've shown it before to my family, and I think it's really good because it kind of combines a lot of different things. You also are, I've been on Ward Radio with you, and you are a regular on Ward Radio. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. One of the original co-hosts with Cardin and Kwaku.
Okay, and then I don't know if our audience knows this, but you also have regal title. You are in the Book of Mormon as King Mosiah II.
Yes.
Which is really kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, you and your wife, under the pen names Blake and Raven Penn, have written a series of books. You want to talk about those books?
Yeah, we just have written a series of fantasy books, dragon fantasy books. It's kind of like if you had a Venn diagram of Aragon, Mistborn, and then Avatar: The Last Airbender. Our book would be right in the middle of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Nerds. I think it's excellent that they are pen names.
Yeah.
That's very good.
I like that.
Yeah. We should also say we have no view on whether Brad will be an apostle in 2028.
Yeah.
We have no view at all.
None.
So for those of you that haven't met Brad, that's a little bit about Brad. I got to know you on a long drive to Southern California for Ward Radio, and I'm really excited to collab with you on Sick of Joseph as we talk about nerdy things, books that apparently some people are interested that we talk about these. Now, you guys already know Jackson, so there he is.
Yeah, in reality, we all just, I think, need to raise our bottles up and congratulate ourselves on successfully pulling off the coup against Hayden. And we got rid of him. Yeah. So I'm super excited about that. And Bradley, we'll see how he does as a big little brother as well. But we are super excited to have Mike and Dave back reading books, talking about the things that have helped them get to where they are in their gospel knowledge. And one of the things that we started because of the well-received video that we posted previously, we started a Discord where Mike and Dave are going to be releasing the titles of the books in the Discord that we're going to be talking about further on, so that you guys can participate in discussions about these gospel books and overall just increase your knowledge of the gospel. But the book we have for this episode is
John Eaton, the Festal Drama the Festal Drama in Deutero-Isaiah. So let's talk about those two terms. So Deutero-Isaiah or Second Isaiah really means Isaiah chapters 40 to 55. For a long time, scholars have had the idea that those might not have been written by the same guy who wrote especially the first 12 to 15 chapters of Isaiah, but really Isaiah 1 to 39 are thought to be, and man, there's a lot of debate over the details, but basically written by Isaiah of Jerusalem, okay, the guy we read about in the early chapters and in the Book of Kings, or ostensibly that guy, and maybe his close disciples. And then Isaiah 40 to 55 are thought to be later. And one very basic reason they're thought to be later is because they mention Cyrus. And if you approach these materials not believing that God can reveal the future, then you say, well, this has to be written later because it has to be written after Cyrus.
Because prophets don't exist,
Right.
so why would we ever allow that?
Right, and we can bracket that and set that aside. So this is a discussion of Isaiah 40 to 55. Okay, Deutero-Isaiah. Festal Drama. What does he mean? Festal is of the feast, and the argument is looking at the connections between Deutero-Isaiah and the great fall festival of ancient Israel. Now, that festival is probably the ancestor of the three festivals of the New Year, Rosh Hashanah, Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, and Sukkot, okay, which all happen back to back to back now in the fall.
And these are all things that still happen today, right?
They happen today. If you live in Brooklyn today, in some parts of Brooklyn, you go out in the fall, and for a week you'll see people have built Sukkot, tabernacle, next to the steps of their brownstone. Okay, like this still happens.
Just in Brooklyn?
Well, I mean, I lived in Brooklyn, but like probably in other significantly Jewish communities.
Bro, were you in Brooklyn in the 80s when the Beastie Boys came out? I'm just curious.
I fought for my right to party here in Provo, Utah.
Okay.
And
I have to bring it back because so you weren't there when they were like, nah, it's a little story that I got to tell.
Okay.
No, sorry. No. Were you there? You weren't there in the 80s.
No.
Okay,
No.
sorry.
No.
And I'm sorry, you guys can cut that out.
in the 90s.
We're keeping that.
In the 90s, I went to Brooklyn.
Okay, 90s.
So,
Okay.
So the idea that before the fall feast articulated itself into these three different pieces, maybe they were basically one long feast celebration together. Maybe even early they were seen as three components, but there was at least one big fall festival. That idea is not unique to John Eaton. So the book is about the connection between that, the fall festival, and Deutero-Isaiah. And by the way, Festal Drama. So both in Deutero-Isaiah and in the fall festival, there are ideas about performance, acting things out, about drama. Okay? So this book is about that. So let me sort of summarize what I think is the hypothesis, and then we can get into the discussion. He's reacting, first of all, there's a bunch of previous scholarship on 2nd Isaiah, and in particular, there's a guy named Engnell who in the 40s publishes an article in a book where he says the servant songs in Isaiah are about the king, the Davidic king, and they are set in the fall festival. Okay? Now, the servant songs are Isaiah 42, 49, 50, and 52. And Engnell has this hypothesis, and Eaton says, I haven't read Engnell's books. Eaton says, well, his arguments were dumb and exaggerated and ridiculous, but let's explore that idea. Ultimately, he comes to affirm the idea. Basically, Engnell made terrible arguments for what I think is a right idea. Okay? And so the argument goes like this. There is this long festival that happens in First Temple Jerusalem. It happens in the fall. He reconstructs the festival, by the way, in 38 points in chapter 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where what happens in the festival?
Oh, we want to go through the 38 points now?
Do you want to?
No, do you want to? We want to do them all, or how many? Do you want to just pick some highlights?
Well, I was going to do some highlights, but we can kind of talk through them all quickly.
No, yeah, we can go through some highlights. So why don't you do one and I'll do one?
Okay. So well, we're doing highlights though.
I don't know. We can do whatever you want.
So it's a New Year festival. It's got themes of creation, for example, are one of the big themes. And so some of the drama that happens at the New Year is that the Lord, Yahweh, goes out of the city of Jerusalem and he defeats enemy gods, okay? And then he comes back in triumph into Jerusalem, and the creation of the world happens out of the bodies of the dead enemy gods. Okay, he defeats Rahab the dragon and in the Babylonian analog Tiamat, and creation is creation by combat. Okay, he goes out and beats the gods and makes the world out of them, and that's part of what's being celebrated. And there's a via sacra, there's a pilgrim road that gets spruced up and fixed in anticipation of the festival, and the king as Yahweh, or maybe priests standing in for the king as Yahweh, ride back from their victory into Jerusalem. It's part of it.
And there's a bunch of these in the 38 points, but one of them is number 8, and he calls it Yahweh's victorious procession into Zion. Now, just like Dave said, this is a drama where they portray creation out of chaos. The chaos has been conquered. And Eaton cites lots of other cultures. So this isn't just happening in Israel. This is happening in the surrounding world. I mean, whether we're reading about Greece and the dragon being conquered by Zeus, or in Canaanite tradition where Baal slaughters Yam and Mo to death and sea, or in the Marduk tradition where the Babylonians have Marduk and he slays...
Puff the Magic Dragon?
Yeah,
he slays Puff the Magic Dragon.
Yeah, he slays a dragon.
It's Tiamat.
It always whenever I'm on camera, it always escapes me at first. I take a minute to warm up. Yeah, Tiamat. There it is. This is on page 13.
Your D&D references.
AKA Puff the Magic Dragon.
Marduk he slays
I just
Tiamat.
insulted a culture very heavily, probably.
And just like you said, use that term via sacra. I don't know if a normal
the sacred road.
Yeah, I don't know if the normal people know what that is.
Yeah.
But the idea is it's a processional where, and it's led by the king, and I believe it's led by the king and his wife. I'm a big fan of sacral kingship. Is the husband and wife.
The marriage with Zion is part of this.
Yes. So, and sacral kingship is a big term, but bottom line, this is what sacral kingship is. The king represents God to the people. It's like this nexus of power. He is a representative of God to the people, but the king represents the people to God. And so I want you to think about this. You're watching a drama where the king represents this, and he talks about this idea of a suffering God that goes down into Sheol and comes out. And this is what's happening in the mythic tradition of all ancient Near Eastern traditions. The God, whether it's Marduk or Baal or Yahweh, goes down into the abyss.
Or Cyrus.
Yeah, and then he comes up and he's victorious. And for normal people, if you've seen Star Wars, Lucas is playing off this idea when he talks to Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell says, you want to make a really cool movie about people shooting laser guns that nerds like me will like? You have to inject it into a story. It has to mean something. And so in the second act, Luke finds out this horrible thing about his father, and then he goes down that abyss. That's that, where he's falling, if you've seen it, where his hand gets cut off. That's never join you. Exactly. No! Luke. Sorry, I could go off on that, but we got to keep it to the scripture. So anyway, so he goes down into the abyss, but then he ascends and he rises and he becomes the victorious conqueror.
He's wounded down there. He's marred.
Yes.
Right? Luke Skywalker loses his hand.
Yeah, so that's the mythic image.
Which, by the way, matches him with his father.
Say that again.
He loses his hand, which makes him like his father, Anakin.
Because Vader also
lost
a hand.
Who also has, he's wounded, and it makes him correspond with or match his father.
Yeah. So, and there's some stuff that Eaton isn't saying that other authors are saying. So I'm gonna get off the reservation, but I promise I'll come back. But in a lot of different scholars, they talk about this when the wounded king comes back. It's when he's next to his bride, and it's only through her that the land is healed and that he is healed, because it's the divine feminine that completes the man. And this is in all mythic traditions. And so the reason why I know this is because I'm a total Psalms geek, and I just finished writing my first draft of my dissertation, and it's on this stuff. So this is kind of where I'm at. So in here, part of these 38 points is that the Psalms are the backstory, because this is before the destruction of the temple. The Psalms are the backstory to the Festal Drama, and the Festal Drama is the backstory to Isaiah 40 through 55. Is that a fair way to put that? Like, we're building on layers.
Yeah. So there's another book Eaton wrote called Kingship and the Psalms, where that's the book where he reconstructs what he thinks the drama is, and he reconstructs it out of the Psalms.
Okay.
So,
and he's thinking, so this Isaiah stuff is written sometime after 700-ish.
Well, let's get to that though.
Okay.
Hold on, we're setting out the background. So first of all, Eaton does not he doesn't talk about a divine feminine, but he does.
I know.
Say
I'm throwing that in there.
But but he does say that part of this is the wedding of Yahweh, but with Zion, who is he takes to be sort of the city, emblematic. But from my point of view, that's sort of potato. I mean, you can say the city is personified as a divine woman, or you could say like the divine woman is symbolized in the city, right? So it's not so very far off. Another key piece of this, the reconstructed Festal Drama, is that the king is presented. And the king is presented in a particular way. He is presented as suffering, possibly dying, being wounded, and then being redeemed by Yahweh. And his redemption is key to the redemption of the people. Okay, and this goes to what are the servant songs, and you can read other commentaries. There is debate here. There are people who think, so for example, a very common Jewish interpretation from Jewish scholars is that the servant is actually just Israel. It's the people Israel.
It's very common.
It is very common. Now, it's a little odd because the servant is said to save Israel. So, okay, so Israel's going to save Israel because Israel's the servant and also the saved one. Like, maybe. But Klaus Balzer in his commentary on 2nd Isaiah suggests that the servant is Moses. People have thought that the servant might be Isaiah himself. It's his biography, right? There's argument. But Eaton says, and this is, I think, a fairly common view at this point, that it's the king, not a specific king, but the king of the feast. Okay, so the same guy who goes out, defeats the forces of chaos, comes back, and we celebrate creation. There's the Eden idea because this happens in the fall. So what's coming is the winter rains, and so winter rains and fertility and the greening of the land all depend on this new creation and the victory over chaos. Right, the coming of rain is sort of the backdrop, or the need for rain to come is the backdrop to the festival. The king is presented as his role is to be the one who is defeated, suffers, and then is redeemed, and his redemption brings about the redemption of Israel. And that's what the servant songs are about, okay?
So it's a play where this is depicted.
Right.
And this is all foreshadowing of Jesus Christ, right?
Well, so
That's an interesting question.
that's an interesting question, and let's come back to that. So I think let's take a totally secular point of view. Did Christians think that it was foreshadowing the coming of Jesus? Yeah, absolutely. Does the Book of Mormon think it? Yeah, absolutely. I want to end on that discussion, the Book of Mosiah, and something really amazing in the ministry of Abinadi. Okay, but for Eaton, the point is, hey, it wasn't about David per se or Zedekiah. It's the king every year. Okay, the king every year does this festival. He suffers, maybe dies.
After he dies and he's redeemed from Sheol or hell, at some point he becomes ritually married to his wife, and then he's anointed, and then he's enthroned. And the anointing and enthronement happens under the shadow of Yahweh's wings. Over and over again in the Psalms it talks about, come under the shadow of my wings. Now, on top of the ark, which is in the Holy of Holies, there's these wings of these angels, and the idea, and I don't remember if he mentions it in this book, but I'm pretty sure he mentions it in Kingship in the Psalms. The idea is that the king is ritually anointed and enthroned in the Holy of Holies, in the Debir. The Debir is the word for oracle, but it's the place of speaking. And so the idea is that the veil is parted, and the audience is watching this drama. They're watching the king be ritually, killed. He's persecuted. If you read Psalm 22, where it talks about my enemies are surrounding me, they're mocking me, they've parted my garments. I mean, Psalm 22 is literally the backdrop to what Catholics call the passion narrative of Jesus, what Latter-day Saints would call the crucifixion and atonement of Jesus Christ. Psalm 22 is the bedrock with which the text is written. So this is being ritually portrayed in 1000 BC. Do you see kind of what's going on here?
Yeah, and I'm seeing remnants of that same ancient Hebrew wedding tradition where you're talking about that he, dies, is redeemed, and then is, you said, married to his spouse?
Married, like ritually married. Like even though he's married to her, he gets ritually married again, and they covenant one with another.
Comes to get his,
yes.
Wow.
Yeah, and you're watching this.
Wow.
Now, as a Latter-day Saint, I'm just going to nerd out and say we have bits of this in our endowment. The temple ideal is you have women and men and their sacral priests, and this is another thing that's talked about in the scholarship, is that because the king represents God to the people, he, in this sense, is ritually going through this drama where he's doing the stuff Jesus did, but because he represents the people to God, he is a sacral king, or the first sacral king, which was Adam. Adam and Eve were the first monarchs. So remember what they say in the endowment. Hey, you guys, consider yourself as Adam. Sisters, consider yourself as Eve. What you're watching is your story. So we must descend into the abyss. We must conquer chaos. We must be ritually enthroned. We need to be married and anointed and made sacral kings. Now, he doesn't say this. I'm saying this because as I'm reading this, I'm seeing it. And so one of the things, and however you want to view it, because there's this whole narrative by the Deuteronomist that says nobody goes in the Holy of Holies, it's a place of darkness, only the high priest goes there once a year. Well, clearly in the Psalms, they're opening this stuff up, and the king's being ritually anointed and thrown in this kind of thing, and the people are seeing it. And so there's a lot of questions that he's not going to answer, but there's a lot of questions that Latter-day Saints have. Like, okay, what do we do with Isaiah? Is it second Isaiah, or did Isaiah write it? Is some of second Isaiah in the Book of Mormon? And what does that mean for the Book of Mormon? Now, big picture for me, because I'm not going to tackle all this.
Well, I have some answers on that.
But
let's finish getting out the thesis of the book, and we should go on some of that.
I'm jumping ahead.
Yeah, all the stuff, and we try to make sense of it.
So there's a list of 38 points, right? They're not all actions. He talks about themes. He talks about the universalism of it, despite the fact that it's Yahweh, Israel's God. All mankind is redeemed as a result of the festival, right? But that's a good, like, in terms of like what they actually do. That's it. There's the procession, there's the wedding, there's the anointing, the presentation of the king, there's the enthronement. Okay, happens in the fall, brings rain. Now he says, who wrote this down? What's the relationship of Second Isaiah to that? Who is Second Isaiah? He argues the following. He says Second Isaiah is not a guy. Okay, Second Isaiah is a school of people. He says a school of prophets in and around the temple, deliberately seeing themselves as in the tradition of Isaiah, applying the name Isaiah to the work they do. And he says, he refers to several generations of work eventually being written down in the form of Second Isaiah. Okay?
Would you say like an oral tradition, a liturgy that becomes textualized?
He in fact says it's essentially an oral tradition. So what we have is a bunch of prophecies. Some of them may be written early, some of them delivered just orally, and then passed down orally until at some point late. We can say maybe after Cyrus. Okay, fine.
Tell our audience when that was. So, because a lot of people are like, well, who's Cyrus? Are we talking about Billy Ray?
5th century
What are we talking about? Yeah.
BC?
Yeah, so Cyrus comes and says, so Cyrus is a
Persia.
He comes and he conquers Babylon and
it's late 6th century.
he frees the
It's late
Jews,
6th
so
century.
540-ish,
Yeah,
539, and he tells the Jews, hey, y'all can go back and build your temple. So they go back and build their temple, and the idea is that sometime during the exile, 586 to 540 BC, or just after the return, Second Isaiah is textualized.
Is written down.
Yeah, written down.
But
So-
pieces of it, this is his argument,
Yeah.
but pieces of it, maybe all of it, existed before.
And maybe long before that.
And maybe even long before that.
Right,
Because,
1000 BC.
Because, yeah. So now Isaiah, he says, okay, Second Isaiah, he says, you can read actually all of Second Isaiah as a drama. And it's not exactly the drama of the fall festival, but it's constantly using the images and language of the fall festival to kind of tell a dramatic tale. Okay, and it's reduced to writing. Let's stipulate that maybe it's after Cyrus, right? Fine, it doesn't matter. 500 BC or something. Okay, but probably if Eaton's right, a bunch of these texts existed before. Now. Let's talk about a couple of Book of Mormon so what's here that are interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. One interesting thing is, hey, who is Lehi? Why are Lehi and his descendants so obsessed with the prophet Isaiah? Right? Well, one possibility is that they are part of or connected with a prophetic circle that may be the people who passed on Isaiah's writings, added to them, and eventually composed. Because even in Isaiah 15 through 39, there are passages people think were written after the original Isaiah of Jerusalem. Okay,
typically, like, for example, Isaiah 1 is considered
Isaiah 1 is a great example.
Yeah,
It's thought to be written much later.
By the way, good way for me to remember this is DNC 1. The very first section of the Doctrine and Covenants is written
later.
way after the DNC's been
the
put
original
together.
intro is what, DNC
Right.
20?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
with Isaiah 1, why is it that they know that?
Good question.
I'd have to go back
Yeah.
and look at a commentary and see.
Because
Yeah.
like I've heard this argument be made all the time. It's like this was not even written in the time before
Yeah.
the Book of Mormon. And I'm like, okay, why? It's like, well, scholars think, and it's always like
Yeah.
a think. And
So
it's-
I can give you some arguments really quick, and we'll get back on the reservation. So I'll be
Yeah.
really
Okay.
quick. So one of the things scholars say is this. The argument between who our enemies are shifts after Isaiah 39. So in Isaiah from 2 to 39, the enemy is Assyria. The enemies of Israel at the time, the big gorilla on the block anciently at the time of Isaiah was Assyria. 721, while Isaiah is alive, Assyria comes in and wrecks the northern 10 tribes. They're scattered. They're the enemy. Now, in the 6th century, so in the 500s BC, 586 to be exact, Babylon is the big gorilla on the block. Isaiah's dead and buried. His bones are, he's done. And the Babylonians come and do things. And so Isaiah 40 through 55, the enemy is Babylon. And so the argument is from the standpoint of who are the Deutero-Isaiah scholars that say this, and by the way, the bulk of them say this, is that this probably reflects a later tradition. Another example of, and I'm not going to go into details on this, but we can sometime, but not today.
Yeah.
Another example of issues are Aramaicisms. What's an Aramaicism? Well, the Aramaic language was the language that was spoken in Babylon during the time of the exile from 586 to 540. And so some scholars say that there's Aramaic bits in Isaiah which reflect a later tradition. Now, other scholars will say, hey, there was Aramaic being spoken before 600 BC. So it's a really difficult thing. And then so really to tackle this from my perspective, if you're going to tackle it, you got to know Hebrew, you got to know Aramaic so that you can actually cipher those. And so it takes like a unicorn scholar to kind of, not every scholar can do that.
Yeah. And one thing that I find interesting, like we were talking about, they mentioned that Isaiah chapter 1 they think was written later. It also doesn't show up in the Book of Mormon.
It doesn't. Yes.
And so like they start with, is it chapter 2?
Starts with chapter 2.
Yeah.
Where he starts quoting Isaiah. So
Yeah.
there's fascinating things going on with Isaiah.
It's a very interesting kind of getting it right. And I think we're going to see a couple other getting it rights before we're done here.
Exactly, because people really like to focus on like, oh, this could possibly be wrong, but also let's ignore the things where it's
But what about the things that are
correct?
right? We're going to see some suspiciously correct today, including one, I think, enormous one.
Let us see.
So one, maybe Lehi is kind of from that circle, right? Let me throw out another one, another fun
Of
Why he there?
priests that are
Like
followers
a
of
circle,
Isaiah.
a circle of Isaiah
Isaianic
prophets.
prophets.
The
Yeah.
Isaiah school. The scholars use this term
One
school
might
all
say
the time.
visionary
men.
The visionary
Yeah.
men, correct.
Dude,
Yeah.
We got to come out with a visionary men shirt.
That
for you.
we should, I
that'd be
would.
sick.
I
By the way,
wear
that
that.
would be
that
dope. I would
every day.
buy
I would
that
wear
shirt
it every day. That is correct. Or the quote, "I know that I am a visionary man." That would be awesome.
Yeah.
But let me point out another thing that's kind of funny. Okay, that's interesting.
Dave is a Jose.
If Eaton's correct, then and if Lehi is of that circle, then we should expect that Lehi takes with him some writings of Isaiah, and that's certainly true because as Jonah Barnes talks about in his forthcoming book, very frequently the Nephite prophets refer to, I read you this, I read you this, I read you this. They're reading out of the brass plates.
What's Jonah Barnes' book called?
It is called The Key to the Keystone. And if I don't know when this airs, it may be available already for pre-order or it will be coming out soon.
So I'm sorry, but tell me more about this book.
We will. I will come back to it. But let me make this point first. So one, they probably have some of the writings of Isaiah, which they seem to. And also, two, they probably know, if Eaton's correct, then they probably know Isaiah as an oral tradition. In other words, they know a group of prophets who are passing on words of Isaiah, right? And probably they even realize, hey, look, this was not original Isaiah of 740 BC who said this, but we attribute all these words that are spoken in this school and that we collectively authenticate and accept, we attribute them to Isaiah, right? But probably they knew prophecies of Isaiah that were oral. In particular, we might expect, if Eaton is right, that some of the they might know some of the content of 2nd Isaiah as oral tradition. Right?
And by the way, I'm going to interrupt you here briefly and go down a dirt road.
No, you wait. Okay, because look at 2nd Nephi 6 with me. You look at 2nd Nephi 6.
Okay.
All right, second
Okay.
by 6. Let's look at it.
Okay, so here is Jacob. This is Jacob's great discourse on entering into the presence of God, is what 2nd Nephi 9 is about. But he quotes some Isaiah first.
In 6?
In 6. And he says, I'm going to read you the words of Isaiah in verse 4.
Verse 4.
But look what he says in verse 5. Now these are the words which Isaiah spake. And there are many things which have been spoken by Isaiah.
Yeah.
Now there are, again, in verse 4, he does say read, so he has it written down, but he knows it as something that Isaiah said. And if you look, there's 3 or 4 passages in the Book of Mormon where the Nephite prophets refer to Isaiah as speaking, right? Which is consistent with, hey, we are part of this circle. We have some material, like, and we can imagine maybe we come out with on the brass plates has some Isaiah, and we know some things orally, and we write those down to capture them before we lose them, right? But we remember that they were things that he spoke, not things that he wrote down.
What's the timeline on all of this? Like, Isaiah is said to have lived and
740,
died.
740
740
BC.
BC, yeah.
Okay, so then that's when he writes his stuff down, and then the other stuff is proposed to have been written
During or after the exile. So the exile is 586 to 540,
Yeah.
and then they come back and rebuild the temple. So it depends on who you read, but the argument is that those chapters are written down sometime during that time period.
But they
And
could
this
have been
relates to the Book of Mormon because Lehi and his family leave Jerusalem around 600 BC.
Yeah, so the
exile.
claim is they shouldn't know any of Second Isaiah.
Yeah.
But actually, one, they might, because the material probably was Eaton says several generations of prophecies, and so that means that it was already old when it was written down, right? And if they knew it, they might know it verbally. Now look, Jacob says this, and what does he quote? 7, and kings shall be their nursing fathers, and queens, or thy nursing fathers, and queens thy nursing mothers. That's Isaiah 49. That's Second Isaiah.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the servant songs. And then he goes on in the next chapter and quotes Isaiah 50, still Second Isaiah, still in the servant songs.
And by the way, Second Isaiah, in my opinion, is the liturgical backdrop to the entire Book of Mormon. When Jesus comes to the Nephites, there's this whole temple discussion where he's ritually doing the actions of the Festal Drama in their presence, and they're doing prayer circles. They're going to the veil. It's all in Third Nephi, and he's quoting Isaiah. And like we should do a Stick of Joseph just on Third Nephi's liturgical use of the Festal Drama. I would love to nerd out on this. But the idea, in my opinion, is that the Second Isaiah is a big deal in the Book of Mormon, and so that's to me a linchpin, an important argument of the people that want to discredit the Book of Mormon. They say this can't be in here because Lehi pieces out in 600 BC, and this wasn't written until 540. Now, John Eaton doesn't have a bone to pick. He's not LES, doesn't probably even know about us. But his whole point is...
Probably dead.
Yeah, he's gone. But the point is that he is saying that this stuff is old. And it's oral, and it's performative. And I'm going to geek out really quick on a short dirt road because I'm going to do it now.
Okay.
Guys, that's the New Testament. Now, people don't know this. It's not commonly discussed, but the Gospel of Mark was a performance. And even Latter-day Saint scholars are acknowledging this. Julie Smith wrote a commentary, the BYU commentary series, on the Gospel of Mark. It's awesome. And in it, she's quoting all these scholars that say the entire Gospel of Mark was a drama. Why? People didn't go down to the library. They didn't go down to Barnes and Noble and pick up the Book of Mark because it didn't exist. Most people probably couldn't read. So how did we learn Mark? We would go and
Through actors.
through theater.
Actors.
Yes.
All right.
And so when you go down that rabbit hole and you start to open your mind and see, oh my goodness. And by the way, scholars say Mark is the backbone to the Gospels. You have Mark and some dude named Quell, the source, and that Luke and Matthew are cribbing Mark. And then John just goes off the reservation and says, I'm just going to talk about the temple, and I'm going to tell a story differently.
the best gospel.
Yeah. I like John. But the thing is I love Mark. And it's an act. It's a 3-act play, and it's a drama, and that's really cool. And there were different versions. You might go to the Mark performance in one city and then see it in a different city, and it had a little bit of a different vibe to it. Same stuff happens.
Only means it's all false.
So it must be. Yeah,
there is a lot of drama, drama in the scriptures. Yeah, there's Klaus Baltzer's commentary on Second Isaiah. He disagrees about who the serving songs are about. He has a very Jewish take, which is they're about Moses, but he thinks the whole thing is a drama. And every chapter, Isaiah 40 to 55, he analyzes in terms of who's speaking now, who's coming on the stage, what kind of props are on the stage. So let me just recap this point, right? So Jacob quotes Second Isaiah and seems to identify it as part of a oral tradition, which is exactly right. And that is exactly how we ought to have some pieces of 2nd Isaiah in the Book of Mormon.
Dave, can you take us back to that argument? Because this is a powerful argument, but it's one thing to hear you say it. It's another thing to look at the text.
It's 2 Nephi 6, verse 5. So he is reading. He says in verse 4, I'm going to read to you. But what he says is not Isaiah wrote this. He says Isaiah spoke it. And he says it twice, right? And 2 Nephi 6, 5, I think, right?
Yeah.
And I find this interesting in Isaiah 5 here, the idea where he says, and now the words which I shall read are they which Isaiah spake concerning all the house of Israel, wherefore they may be likened unto you, for ye are the house of Israel. And there are many things which have been spoken by Isaiah which may be likened unto you because ye are of the house of Israel. That very idea that these things can be likened unto you is kind of what you were talking about earlier, where it starts off with the Assyrians being the enemy, but then it morphs into the Babylonians being the enemy. We're likening these words, this repeated idea throughout time, to our current situation.
Also think about it in terms of a drama, right?
Yes.
So Baltzer's commentary on Isaiah 51, he says, Isaiah 51 is a mystery drama in which the entire audience is initiated.
Yes.
So the audience is to liken what the actors are doing unto them.
By the way, when I
okay.
watched your film, Escape from Germany, the best, I think the best conversations are after the movie where you say, okay, what would you do? Like you watch a movie, and if it's really good, you get sucked into it, and you're like, oh, what would I do if I was so and so? Does that make sense? Like that's what drama does. It's participatory,
You know?
and it's invitational.
Yeah. So I want to get at a couple of just like pieces of scholarly vocabulary here too.
Yeah.
People who are reading this and sort of scholarly ideas or techniques that you'll encounter. Okay. One is there's a German phrase that you'll see a lot, which is Sitz im Leben. Okay.
Or if I say it, it sits in Laban because I'm lazy.
Yeah.
But you say it right, I'm sure.
It's SITZ. It looks like sits. Okay, I-M, Leben, L-E-B-E-N. The S and the L are technically capitalized. German capitalizes nouns. Okay, Sitz im Leben means the setting in life. So one of the sort of common scholarly tools has a surprising amount of imagination to it. Okay, because what it is you look at a text and you go, well, what? Okay, on the page it's dead. It's the skeleton of the text. What did it do in life? What is the context in which this was read? Who would say these things? Who would do these things? People aren't reading popular fiction, right? And so, wow, telemarketer. People aren't reading popular fiction, right? So so what did the text do? What did it mean? What are the contexts in which it was read or performed, right? And inevitably, you have to be making guesses, looking at the network of all of the 150 Psalms, right? And thinking, well, if I read these all together and I think about them, I can see that, Psalm 89 or Psalm 2 is about the coronation of the king. And, what is the setting of this? Well, it seems to be in a feast setting. There seems to be a procession, right? So, Sitz im Leben, setting in life. You're going to see that phrase. That's what it means, and realize that I'm repeating myself. It is a work of imagination. You, the scholar, are trying to think about what, before it became just a text on a page, what would this text do, right?
But scholars triangulate. So they look at the neighboring cultures and they say, they did a drama too. At the new year. Oh, and the same stuff's happening. And then they start seeing it happening over and over again in different cultures, and scholars say, maybe there's a connection.
Yeah, and I like the maybe, right? Because we're in the world of scholarship. It's educated guesses. You're trying to make good guesses about what you're reading. The other thing I want to talk about is form criticism. And this is just vocabulary, right? You're going to encounter these terms, and John Eaton's not going to, if he refers to form critics or form criticism, he's not going to explain what form criticism is. So what is it? Form criticism, I think it's Hermann Gunkel who's said to be the sort of first great form critic. Form criticism is you look at a passage and you go, okay, if it's not a chapter of the Bible, what is it? Is it a speech? Is it a lawsuit? Right? Is it an epic poem? Right?
A lament.
Is it a lament? Yeah. What is the form that is here? Right? And those two, the Zitzim Laban kind of an imagination approach and form criticism are, they're related, but they're not necessarily intrinsically tied. But so one of the things Eaton says is it goes through and identifies forms in every passage that he thinks are, this is a lawsuit, this is a lament, this is, a psalm of praise in Second Isaiah, and says, well, and they all, the context that makes the most sense, the Zitzim Laban, where I can imagine them being used, is the Festal Drama, right? And here they're being assembled to tell this story or communicate this prophecy. So those are really just kind of two pieces of vocabulary. That's my dirt road.
Yeah, awesome.
Now, I don't know how we're doing on time. I want to make what I think is a really big point before we wind up. Mike, what else have you got that you want to say about John Eaton here?
Wow. Yeah, so there's so many things, but I'm just going to read this bit. It's on page 22, and it's number 18 of his 38 points of light. 38 points of light coming together. Not going to raise taxes. Not going to debt.
Read my lips.
Not going to debt. Number 18. Sorry, that's old school.
Mike just dated himself.
That's Dana Carvey channeling George Bush.
Oh, wow.
Sorry, yeah, Dana Carvey is one of my favorites.
I was like, I'm
not
sure
gonna do it.
this has something to do with the president.
Yeah,
but
not going to debt.
Doesn't sound like Trump.
38 points of light. He says in number 18, he says, the nature and circumstances of the festival at Jerusalem produced combination of ideas in the text which would otherwise be difficult to explain. So he says, listen, this is hard to understand unless you know what's going on. And anybody in our audience who's read Isaiah can go, yeah, there's stuff that's difficult to understand. And Nephi even says, it's going to be hard to understand unless you know these things. And he says, you got to know the manner of prophesying among the Jews. I'm going to translate that as, know the temple drama. I mean, that's one thing I would say. So if you know the temple drama, when you read it, you're like, okay, how does this fit in? But then he says this, as founder and upholder of right order, Yahweh comes with functions of creator, warrior, king, judge, savior, shepherd, and covenant Lord. And then he talks about, okay, how is this fleshed out? One of the things that he talks about are these two types of psalms called royal and enthronement psalms. The enthronement psalms are where essentially, I've got it right here. I just wanted to read a couple of them, and I'm really bad at this. Okay, the royal psalms are where the king of Israel is the focus, and they celebrate basically what the king has to do. And there's a list of them. It starts with 2, and then it goes all the way to 110. Now, the reason why I think this is important is because Psalm 110 and Psalm 2 are the most quoted psalms in the New Testament. I wrote a whole article on this on my website, Talking Scripture, where I talk about this is geeked out so much. I believe Psalm 110 is quoted or channeled like 40 times in the New Testament. So if it's quoted that much, it must mean something, right? And so the royal psalms focus on, okay, this is what the king's to do. The enthronement psalms focus on, this is what Yahweh does. He is the king. He is the deliverer. Now, Eaton doesn't say this, but I put the two together like chocolate and peanut butter and say, in Jesus of Nazareth is both. He is the royal king, but he is Yahweh incarnate. And that is the argument of the New Testament writers. Now, if Psalm 110 is quoted so many times, I guess the last thing I would say about this is let's look at it. So go to Psalm 110. And this is quoted so much. So it must, like I said, it must matter.
That's an outrageous thesis.
That it must matter?
If people talk about something a lot, they care.
I know. I'm pretty much Dr. Obvious. Like, what is the name of that movie, Brad, where you escape from Germany? Yeah, Brad, you want to read it?
Germany.
Yeah, it's a short psalm. Are you okay just to read the whole thing?
For sure. So Psalm 110.
Yeah.
A psalm of David. The Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou at my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool. The Lord shall send the rod of thy strength out of Zion. Rule thou in the midst of thine enemies. Thy people shall be willing in the day of thy power, in the beauties of holiness from the womb of the morning. Thou hast the dew of thy youth. The Lord hath sworn and will not repent. Thou art a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. The Lord at thy right hand shall strike through kings in the day of his wrath. He shall judge among the heathen. He shall fill the places with the dead bodies. He shall wound the heads over many countries. He shall drink of the brook in the way. Therefore shall he lift up the head.
And the other psalm is Psalm 2. But before we go to Psalm 2, I just want to break down Psalm 110 briefly here. So we have this idea that the Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand. Okay, what's going on? When the king was enthroned and anointed in the temple ceremony, the idea is that he was Yahweh's right-hand man. So God, and I believe that in the drama, there was a priest who acted in the place of God. And he turned to the audience with the king enthroned next to his wife, and he said to the audience, speaking as if he were God, this is my right-hand man. Now in Psalm 2, the king is going to be called God's son, okay? And that was very common in the ancient Near East, that the king would be the son of the god. Now, the imagery in verses 5, 6, and 7 are violent images of a warrior who has the ability to defend his people. Now, this is really odd to us in amongst Latter-day Saint culture. Like, why would we depict God or the king violently like this? But in the ancient Near East, Yahweh was portrayed as a warrior because you're vulnerable. You're this little sliver of dirt, and you need somebody who can use violence to make sure that you're safe. Now, this shouldn't be too foreign to us because today, Israel is a little sliver of land that needs people that can put violence to make sure that they're safe. I mean, so we just kind of have to relax our eyes a little bit.
And I mean, you see this throughout other psalms where they say, thy rod and thy staff comfort me. Those are weapons to keep away wolves. This is a defensive sort of thing. Yeah.
Could be read that way, certainly.
Also, if this is an enthronement psalm and the context is the festival, then before being enthroned and having these things said as he's anointed and seated, the king as Yahweh has defeated cosmic enemies in order to bring about creation, right? So Genesis 1, it's the word that creates. But in the festival, in the Psalms, it is Yahweh, and in Exodus 15, it is Yahweh crushing cosmic enemies and turning their bodies into the new creation.
Yeah, they call this, I'm going to bust the German, but they call it Chaos Kampf. I don't know if I'm doing that. The idea that they're creating out of chaos, and the Psalms, especially
by
Psalm
war. Kampf is war.
Yeah, by war. The idea is that
struggle.
Yeah. Ooh, good.
I don't know anything about that.
Or struggle. Sorry. Sorry, it just reminds me of that reel I saw where this kid gets a copy of Mein Kampf for Christmas from his grandpa, and the dad says to the grandpa, he's like, he wanted Minecraft. And the kid looks like, what do I do with this? I thought it was so funny. He wanted Minecraft. Anyway, so struggle.
That's terrible.
Sorry, creation out of chaos.
Yeah.
So the king represents Yahweh, this person who has the ability to create out of violence. And then I don't want to go to Psalm 2 without first reading verse 4. The Lord has sworn and will not return. I'm not going to get into that bit.
Not change his mind.
Not change his mind. You are a priest after the order of Melchizedek. And so a lot of scholars wrestle with this, like, what is the order of Melchizedek? Now, as a Latter-day Saint, I mean, we don't have a lot in the Bible about this, but as a Latter-day Saint, we say there's probably something to this order. Mm-hmm. Now, that's for maybe another discussion, but go to Psalm 2 now really quick. And this is the other one. Like I said, these two Psalms are heavily quoted in the New Testament.
Just looking at the quotes in that first verse of 110, it's quoted in 5 different books of Scripture.
Dang.
Yeah.
So that one's a big one.
Okay, we're not going to read all of Psalm 2, but I just want to read verse 6 and 7. So, Jackson, you want to read those for us?
Yeah. Psalm 2, verses 6 and 7, It says, Yet have I set my king upon the holy hill of Zion. I will declare the decree. The Lord hath said unto me, Thou art my son. This day have I begotten thee.
Okay, so these Psalms are quoted, like in the New Testament, like I said, heavily quoted. And the idea, from the Festal Drama perspective is that the king is set on the hill of Zion. He's in the temple. He's been washed, anointed, enthroned. He's next to his wife and his sacral kings. They represent the embodiment of Yahweh's Zedek and his Emet. The word Zedek is this idea of righteousness, and Emet is this is truth. Yeah, you know your stuff. You're
teaching me.
He's the embodiment of righteousness and truth. It's the Egyptian understanding of ma'at, right order. If there's right order, the land will be blessed, we'll have fertility, we'll have rain, as David's discussed, and the families of the earth that submit to Yahweh will be fertile and blessed. But if he breaks those covenants, if the order is broken, chaos results. This is the theme of the Book of Mormon. As go the king and the people, so goes the land. And over again, when the prophets of the Book of Mormon talk about this, they talk about the stench of the land and the carcasses and the bodies. Why? Death is the result of following. There's two ways, the path of the two ways. If you go this way, there's death. If you go this way, Ma'at, Zedek, Emet, then there's peace and happiness. And so that's a big Book of Mormon theme that's coming out of this tradition. There was one thing else I was going to say, but I forgot what it was. Oh, it was this. Here it was. Because the king and queen represent the people to God, we are them. We are to become sacral kings or monarchs, as it were. And so that's Exodus 19. Now I'm kind of bleeding into a discussion, a book we'll do another day. One day we'll do this book called The Cultic Prophet and Israel's Psalmody. But in this book, the author, is this Johnson? Aubrey Johnson Aubrey Johnson has this whole bit where he says, what do we do with Exodus 19? Where Yahweh says, I want to make you a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And I would say, well, that's what this is. When you watch the king and queen do this, what God is saying to the people is, I want you to recreate Eden. You are Adam and Eve, and go make it happen in your families. And so that's probably my big takeaway at the end of this discussion.
That's awesome. Let me give a big connection that I made.
He's getting excited.
Okay. I am excited about this. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to articulate the awesomeness, but I'm going to give it a shot. Let me start by reading a quote. Okay, so here's John Eaton. All right, this is page 101. And he's talking about he's talking about the rites, the liturgy that the sort of Isaiah prophets knew, okay, and how at a certain time they must have seemed really vivid and poignant, as if they suddenly came to life.
Yeah.
Okay. The dramatic mysteries of royal suffering, that's the servant songs.
Where you at?
On page 101, bottom of page 101.
Point to where you're at. I want to see. Okay, sorry.
The dramatic mysteries of royal suffering in the old rites will have seemed to these prophets to have been manifested historically in the cutting off of the dynasty and the long imprisonment of the virtually innocent Jehoiakim in its last main representative. Right? So when the last king of the dynasty becomes a sort of slave to Babylon, they must have seen in the servant songs, wow, it is like come real. Right.
And Jehoiakim is one of the sons
of Zedekiah, right?
Josiah?
No.
Brothers of
Zedekiah?
Zedekiah?
Man, I don't know.
He's the last king before Zedekiah, so he gets taken out.
Oh, he's before Zedekiah.
Yeah, he's one of...
Babylon put Zedekiah in.
Thank you. Okay.
He is Zedekiah's nephew.
I should know that. You guys are distracting me from the point I wanted to make.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
But I love it. Well done. You can correct Dave. That's fine. Dave makes no claim to infallibility or any authority of any kind. So, okay, let's talk about Jonah Barnes' book that's coming out.
No wonder. I was like, where's he going with this? And then I'm like, oh, you're going to Jonah Barnes.
It's the key to the keystone.
Okay.
And what Jonah is doing is he's looking at, there's this basic kind of strange question, which is the Book of Mormon comes out in 1829. And it looks like a real outlier in some of the claims it makes about doctrine, about Adam and Eve, and about the atonement, and how much what does ancient Israel think about the Messiah? What do they know about Christ, if anything?
Alexander Campbell beats it up for that. Like, what's it talking about Jesus for?
A lot of people do. E.D. Howe It's hilarious. What a silly boy this person is. But then after the Book of Mormon, there's one or two before. Like the Book of Enoch First Enoch is actually published in English in 1821, although it doesn't seem to be in the U.S. really until after the Book of Mormon. But then after the Book of Mormon, there's a flood of books. Until now, there are dozens, maybe hundreds of books, which Jonah lumps all together and calls the Apocryphal books, okay? But you might see them referred to as pseudepigrapha or under various names like these are the Nag Hammadi texts or these are the Dead Sea Scrolls or other things, okay? Other books that look like extra-biblical literature.
That's my favorite way to describe it.
Books that look like they should have been in the Bible but were not, okay? And that's kind of agree with the Book of Mormon on these points, as opposed to the sort of standard conventional Christian reading of the Scriptures. And you need some kind of an explanation. And Jonah takes this as his launching point, really to explore the brass plates, okay? And to get into, hey, the Nephites had Scriptures with them. They're not the Old Testament. Right? They're not the Old Testament.
As we have it.
Right.
Right.
There are pieces, maybe as much as about half is his assessment of the Old Testament as we have it is on the brass plates. And then there's a bunch of other stuff, right, that is not in our Old Testaments on the brass plates. And obviously, Zenos, Zenoch, Nahum are examples.
First Nephi 19:10.
But also... But also the Nephites seem to have a different understanding about Eden than is conventionally passed down by Jews and Christians. So where did that come from? Well, that seems to have come off the brass plates too, and different assessments about Eve. And they have way more information about Lucifer than is in the Old Testament. Where does that come from? Seems to have come from the brass plates. And this stuff seems to also be in the Apocrypha, suggesting that many of the Apocrypha are influenced by the brass plates, or may even have been on the brass plates, right? That's what the book is about.
And what's the title of his book again?
It's called The Key to the Keystone.
Okay.
And can I just add one thing before you keep going?
Yeah.
Like you were saying, it may have pieces, but there's a whole lot more that it contained that the Old Testament doesn't have. Because when in 1 Nephi chapter 13, when it's talking about how, the first people that come to America will have a book, a record of the Jews, which is essentially the Bible. And then it says, the book which thou beholdest is a record of the Jews, which contain the covenants of the Lord, which he hath made unto the house of Israel. And it also containeth many of the prophecies of the holy prophets, and it is a record like unto the engravings which are upon the brass plates, save they are not so many. And so essentially what he's saying is there's going to be a book that has a lot of these same prophecies, which is the Old Testament, but it's not going to be as big and as plentiful as the brass plates that we have and the engravings here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's the book. Now, there's a particular chapter that is worth the price of admission.
In his book?
In his book, where he talks about Abinadi. Now, he's talked about this stuff, I think, on the Word Radio. So I think, Brad, you might have been in that conversation already. You guys may all have heard this. This may be, to some extent, recap for everyone, but then I'm going to point something out that he hasn't talked about
Dave,
before.
I've never heard it, so
Okay.
I'm at least new to this.
Who is Abinadi? Okay. There's an interesting possibility, which is in the book of Omni, the last record keeper of the plates, and these are descended from Nephi, right, is Amaleki. So he is a Nephite prince. He's a prince of the house of Nephi, and maybe descended from Jacob, okay? But a prince of the house of Nephi, keeper of the plates. And he has no sons. And so ultimately he gives the records to Benjamin. And this is basically where the small plates end, okay? And his father's name is Abinadam. And he says, I have a brother that went with Zeniff and those guys off to go reclaim the lands of our fathers. Okay? So we have that. We have a missing prince of the house of Nephi, keeper of the plates, a person who would have been familiar with the brass plates, would have been educated in their contents, would have also, by the way, known about the rights of kingship. He was a prince of the house of Nephi. Disappears from the record. His father is Abinadam. Then, out of nowhere, a guy named Abinadi shows up to the people of Zeniff as a prophet, right? By the way, after his death, when Lamoni reports his death to, not Lamoni, Limhi reports his death to Ammon and Ammon's 3 missionary cohorts, and it says that they mourned the death of Abinadi. Now, those may be coincidences, or it may be that Abinadi was the son of Abinadam, prince of the house of Nephi, trained in the scriptures, went with the people of Zenith, finds himself called as a prophet to try and call Noah to repentance, and is executed by Noah. Okay?
Oh, and he's quoting all the servant songs. I see where you're going.
No, stop. Sorry. Mike just stole my thunder. But
I'm trying to keep up with you.
No, you got ahead of me. That's exactly right. So here's the thing that Jonah, I don't think said when you guys talked about this on Word Radio, but is, I think it's in the book. So what does Abinadi do? Well, he's imprisoned, he's beaten, he's tortured. They are going to kill him. By the way, Jerry Grover has argued that Noah and his people are killing him at a feast, at a holiday. And when they have them chained up and they're arguing about the meaning of the law of Moses, what does he quote in Mosiah 14? Well, he quotes Isaiah 53, which is one of the servant songs, which is about the Davidic king beaten, humiliated, imprisoned before he rises again. Now, this is actually spectacular.
I think I know where you're going.
This is spectacular. Well,
Finally, I think I know where you're going.
This is it. There's multiple things here. One, is he saying, hey, you have not understood the law of Moses because the true law of Moses really only has meaning in connection with the coming of Christ, which was shown to you through the rituals of kingship. Yes, he is saying that. Okay? Is he also seeing himself as the last prince of the house of Nephi and understanding and talking about his own death, right? He has been humiliated. He is going to be executed, if Jerry Grover is right, Jerry, at a feast, at a sacred occasion, okay? Not sacred to him or God, but sacred to King Noah, right? And he is citing this text about kingship, right, in connection with that. Yes, apparently also that. By the way, is there also like this beautiful, there's poignancy, right? Because Abinadi is self-aware. He's standing there, right? He's not a guy out of nowhere. He is the prince. He's the last of the house of Nephi.
He's the liturgical Davidic king that's going to go through it.
He is the Davidic king, and they are going to kill him, and he knows it. And he quotes this saying, effectively,
this is me.
I am here for the thing I am here for. You are going to kill me.
And by the way, that's a type of Christ. That's what prophets are.
And like there's like psychological movement in Abinadi, right? Because it starts with this my suffering, I am humiliated, and Christ is coming. And my suffering and humiliation are so you would understand the law that you misunderstand. Christ is coming, and he is the one who gives meaning to it all. And does that add like an incredible layer of poignancy to the whole scene, right? It's not just preaching. It is about Abinadi the man and who he is. And let us remember, depending on whose account you take, Joseph put his face in a hat and dictated this 6 hours a day or whatever, and then would say, okay, Brother Oliver, well done. Let's go chop wood and eat biscuits, right? Like the idea that a farmer in 1829 invented, because consider this, the narrative is not only astonishingly complex and sophisticated, it is utterly unself-conscious. Joseph does this, and he doesn't go, by the way, Abinadi is a prince, and he's quoting and then by the way, he's also 120 years ahead of Engnell, making the hypothesis that the suffering servant is the Davidic king, okay? So there's Joseph the time traveler, and also then he performs an astonishing feat of literature and then doesn't take any notice of it, but just moves on, right? And we're supposed to think that Joseph just like made this up in dictation to Oliver Cowdery.
Go, Brad.
Oh, this is just really a fascinating part of the Book of Mormon because it's so separate from things like what you're talking about in Omni at the very end of the small plates. We don't get to Abinadi until Mosiah 15. And so we have this huge separation that keeps people from making these sort of connections. But once you see it, you're like, oh.
And by the way, it was translated first, right? So
Yeah.
Mosiah is translated first, and then like at the end of the process, yeah.
And,
Yeah.
And as a nerd, and you know this as a writer, I'll write a book, and then I will go back and make sure that I inject the points that my conclusion says I'm going to conclude with. I better make sure they're in there, and I'm going back and putting them in.
And Joseph
and
didn't
this is
do
a
it.
one-shot run.
Yeah.
They did a little copy edit was all they did.
So what I really like about what I'm catching you say is, as the Davidic king, Abinadi is portraying the ritual literally right in front of them.
This is the quote about Jehoiakim, right? Like it becomes astonishingly poignant to those who are in the know that here the last member of the house of Nephi is historically the rite has become real in his life.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this. This is something I've been thinking about a lot with Zenith. Okay. When we look in the story of how Solomon was named,
Oh, interesting. Okay.
what does David say he will name Solomon? The Lord tells him he will name him a son of rest. Right?
Okay. Yep.
Now, Zenith, he goes back to the land of Nephi, where the temple was built after the manner of Solomon. He names his son what?
Noach.
No, yeah.
Which is Hebrew for
Rest.
For rest, yeah.
Now, how much more of this being a slap in the face to Noah? He was supposed to be this Davidic king, but he was wrong and didn't live correctly. And
You
so
had
now,
one job, Noah.
Yeah.
So right, so there's like a whole other layer of psychological complexity that we're inferring, which is here is the true heir to the throne in front of basically a usurper.
Jesus to Caiaphas, bro.
Yes, showing I am living the ritual obligations while you are getting drunk and fat with your concubines. Yeah.
Yeah. But literally, this is the New Testament. This is Jesus, the true Davidic king, in front of the high priest who ain't no high priest, right? I mean, it's being repeated over and over again. It's so deep.
I was just gonna say, this is taken to like if you zoom out 30,000 feet, like Noah is Satan, Lucifer, the one that was chosen, that would have been the one, and then he ends up being the one who inspires those who kill Christ.
Yeah, super interesting.
On the high level, that's what it is as well.
Yeah. The macrocosm and the microcosm corresponding. Yeah. So this is John Eaton, Festal Drama in Deutero-Isaiah.
This is what I would say. God bless you two for finding interest in a title called Festal Drama in Deutero-Isaiah with a cover like that. Like, that's amazing.
Can I tell
Thank
you
so much.
Like that guy looks bored of the title.
But this book really changed the way I look at 2nd Isaiah. Years ago when I was going down the weeds of the arguments, and I read that book and I thought, there's more going on here. I was like, what's his name in Close Encounters of the Third Kind when he's making the thing out of potatoes, and he's like, this means something. Richard Dreyfuss. And I
was
read that
not
book.
Paul Newman. It's the other Paul Newman.
I read this book and I'm like, this means something. I didn't quite put it together, but every time I talk to Dave, I walk away with more stuff. Like, I really enjoyed how you went to Jacob's commentary and said, these are the words Isaiah spake. Bro, that was epic for me. Thank you.
Yeah. That the thought that this is an oral tradition that has been around for a long time helps a lot, because it has felt like the Deutero-Isaiah options are either this is proof the Book of Mormon's all made up because it came too late, or you just have to go full Chad mode and be like, yes,
Scholars
Isaiah
are
wrote
wrong.
it all. Scholars are totally wrong.
Yeah.
Prophecy is the
Correct.
exact way it is. And that's an okay position to take.
Sure.
But this gives another option in the ways to understand this, which I think is very fascinating.
100%. 100%.
That was a lot of fun, bro.
Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another installment of Out of the Best Books with Mike and Dave, or Dave and Mike. Share this with people that you think would find value in the teachings of these extra biblical commentary books, because I don't know about you guys, but the type of knowledge and understanding of the scriptures that these two people have is something that I aspire to gain in my life. And so, as always, stay curious and hungry.